Thank you, Chairwoman. While I intend to support this bill, I hope my Republican colleagues know that it falls short of substantial change. This legislation has no new funding for the proposed training and reporting requirements, most of which are already standard practice within DOL. And more importantly, it fails to address the root causes of trafficking in any meaningful way. Many of the most at risk of being trafficked are undocumented immigrants who are afraid of reporting their abuse because they might be deported if they do. The current mission of House Republicans is to make that harder for these victims by creating an even more punitive immigration system. How do we expect people to tell their stories to DOL investigators when there is no guarantee that they will be protected from retaliation from their employers? When employers threaten people with deportation, there is nothing wrong with setting up additional training to help people identify victims of trafficking. But what good does it do to identify victims if we cannot also protect them? We need to be having more serious, thoughtful discussions. Committee Republicans have not even held a hearing on child labor issues, even though child labor violations have increased by almost 400% over the last decade. We should be marking up more impactful bills, from enhancing supply chain accountability to strongly penalizing illegal labor practices. We should be guaranteeing protection from deportation for victims of trafficking, allowing them the freedom of speaking to investigators or law enforcement without fear. Given what is before us today, I do think that there are ways to strengthen this bill to be more responsive to victims' rights. That is why I am offering an amendment to incorporate best practices for ensuring protections for the rights of victims within the required training. This would include collaboration with state and local officials and community organizations. For example, let's take my home state of Minnesota and its safe harbor laws. Mirrors in over 30 other states which protect exploited children from criminal prosecution. Because we enacted these laws, state and local officials are well positioned to work with federal agencies to ensure that enforcement is done carefully and effectively within the protection of underage sex trafficking victims in mind. Additionally, my amendment would also emphasize DOL training efforts in states that have significant increases in child labor violations. As it stands, this bill does the bare minimum to identify suspected victims and go after human traffickers. And while my amendment signifies a step forward, much more necessary comprehensive reform, I urge this committee to take on a more serious approach to this issue, centered on human rights of our most vulnerable. I urge my colleagues to support this sensible amendment. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.